Boker Tov, good morning everyone. Thank you so much for joining us right here in Rechavia, Nachlat in Yerushalayim, and around the world, wherever you are, whenever you watch this video. In fact, I could probably say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and everyone take it for wherever you are and whenever you are watching this. Over the last couple of days, we've been explaining what the Rebbe Rashab introduces in this special Maamar of VeYadaata from 1896. The idea of being able to, on one hand, give, teach, and deliver, and on the other hand, restrain and condense the concept in order that the deliverance should be received by the student in the proper way. We brought a couple of examples. And we're going to hopefully continue with other examples as well. We're towards the bottom of the page of the quote-unquote new part of the Maamar. And this is how it reads. Now let's read along in the text. V'hinei kol tzimtzum v'helem hanal hu rak legabei hamekabel, lo legabei hamashpia. This whole idea of tzimtzum and condensing the concept, the revelation, is only for the receiver, for the student, not for the teacher, for the one that's delivering the concept. Shaharei gabei hamashpia meir begilui kol omek sichlo v'chochmato v'hasechel hamitzamtzam k'mo shehaya kodem shenitzamtzem. If you look at the teacher, if you look at the one that's delivering the concept, for them, even while they're teaching, they have the entire main point even while they're teaching. It's only that the concealment is only for the receiver, for the student, in order that the student should not be lost. The gamba mishalim, also in the metaphors, harehu ro'eh kol omek hasechel. The teacher sees all of the depth of the sechel. Hainu lozu levad. Not only does he see sheba sechel hamtzumtzam meir etzlo kol omek hasechel. Not only that in this diluted, condensed thought, that he sees all the depth of this concept. Ela shagam b'hamishalim, even in the metaphors, harehu ro'eh kol protei nimshal, he sees all of the details of the analogy. K'moshu etzlo, as it was by him, k'shehaya mufshat mikol levush v'tzimtzum v'helem. Even before the concept was covered over by the metaphor. So for him, for the teacher, there's no concealment. He sees the entire concept the entire time. Ukmo derech mashal, for an example, ha'aretz hagashmi, the physical land, physical earth. Hu mashal lebchinet malchut shalamala. It's a metaphor for the concept of malchut above. I already said a bracha before the class, so l'chaim. It's only water. Same color, but hainu. When we talk about the earth, the world, aviyuto, the thickness of the earth. I believe it's many miles. V'kadurato, and the fact that the earth is round. V'kovdo, and its heavy weight. Umasha matzmiach tzmachim, and the fact that it sprouts, gives forth all kinds of things like flowers and plants and trees. The land, the literal land is an example, a metaphor for the level of Malchut, the final level of Atzilut, the highest world, as we've explained. It's the level of Malchut which enables there to be a world from nothing into something. Ex nihilo. A person looks into the physical ground, and you can see kol pratea nimshal, the Malchut Atzilut. Akadosh Baruch Hu, if you look at the Torah and the Chassidus, even while the metaphor is being delivered, you can see already the analogy of Atzilut. So when you see the concept of a seed, for example, which is being planted, and then it dissolves, and then a tree grows from it, and branches, and fruit, and sometimes flowers, leaves, everything. So Hashem can see within the analogy, within the metaphor, can see all of the details of the analogy. Hashem can see in the mashal, in the metaphor, how there's no difference between the metaphor and the analogy. Within the metaphor, Hashem can see the analogy of Malchut. So in other words, the earth is not separated at all from Malchut. I'll give you an example. In one of the Maamarim of the Alter Rebbe for the holiday of Purim, so the Alter Rebbe writes something interesting. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the Alter Rebbe says, I believe the beginning of the Maamar is, it's the beginning of the 6th chapter. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank, but the Alter Rebbe says over there, Balayla hahu nadadash nasa melech. As we've talked before, that in a Chasidic Maamar, in a Chasidic discourse, it starts off with a verse, and that's like the address to get into the Maamar. And so he starts off with the Balaylahu. On that very night, the king, Achashverosh, could not sleep. And then the advisor brought him his Sefer HaZichronot. And in Chassidus, in Medrash, it says that Melech really refers to Hashem, who is the true Malka Shalalam. He's a true king. So the Alter Rebbe says something to this effect. He says, he goes right into the analogy of Balayla Hahu talking about Hashem, as if we know already that Melech in this case means Hashem. So from his perspective, perhaps he can see clearly, because he was a tzaddik, he can see just reading the Megillah of Purim, he right away sees the analogy. So for us, simple people, we see the Megillah, we read the Megillah and we see the story, we understand the story of Mordechai, Esther, Achashverosh, Haman, etc. And then we have to learn and we have to clarify that really, on a deeper level, we're talking about Hashem. But that's only after the literal story of Mordechai and Esther, etc. But for a tzaddik, when a tzaddik learns Chassidus, Kabbalah, Torah, they have a laser vision, And right away, they see the analogy. In other words, they see the story of the Megillah as being a metaphor and a cloth for the essence. So the story of the Megillah, in essence, is really, I'm not going to say it's not a real story. It did happen, but a perspective that we can have when we view, when we learn, when we hear, when we understand the story of the Megillah, we can have a much clearer perspective to say, you know what? It's not only, or in a sense, it's not really the story of the Megillah. Obviously it is, but it's not only that. The real depth is really the analogy of Malko Shel Olam. You say Melech, king? Who's the real king? Achashverosh? Come on, between you and I, is he a real king? If the Torah says king, who are we referring to, Hashem? So the more we learn Torah, the more we learn Kabbalah and Chassidus, we train our minds to look at ourselves, to look at the Torah, to look at the world, and to look at stories of our history, to be able to be a stepping stone for us to understand Hashem better. All of the above is only like a mashal. It says that the Torah is a mashal kadmona shel olam. So if the Torah is, in essence, trying to bring out the greatness of Hashem, so it's our challenge to be able to put on special lenses, special glasses, to be able to understand that. So of course, for you and I, first we need to learn the Torah. And then, once we learn the Torah, then we can try to interpret the analogy. But that's just a second step. A tzaddik goes right to the deeper step. Obviously, he reads the text of the Torah, but in his understanding, in his spiritual vision, it's like the teacher. It's like the one that's delivering the class to little children. Right away, the entire time, he sees the pnimiyut, the essence of the seichel. And that's something which we can train ourselves, that when we learn Torah, then we should really see the depth of it. Let me give you another example. This is an example of when a person learns, it says that Ashrei mi shebalakan v'talmudo biyado. It says that praiseworthy is a person who, after 120, after 180, comes to the higher, to the world of truth, olam haba, the world to come. V'talmudo biyado, and his Talmud is in his hand. It doesn't mean literally the book of Talmud. It means that someone that learned Torah, when we learn Torah down here, then the Torah that we learn comes with the individual after 120. The more one reviews the Torah that they learned, it becomes more and more part of the person. And so, what happens when a person learns Torah in the higher world? They learn the same Torah. But then they learn the Torah on a much deeper level. So when we learn Torah down here in the Talmud, but in Baba Kama, the tractate Baba Kama, Shor shenagachet para, if there is an ox which gored the cow, so who has the owner of this one has to pay a certain amount of money or a certain percentage to the owner of the cow. Now, with all due respect to the Torah, it seems to be discussing something which doesn't exactly seem very holy. I mean, there is a mitzvah in Parshat Mishpatim in the Torah that you have to learn certain basic physical things. But when you talk about the Torah, the holy Torah Kedosha, is this what you're teaching me? You're teaching me about oxen and cows and damages. We should be learning about Shabbos Kodesh. We do. But How does the Shor Shenagachat Hapara, how exactly does that relate to the Holy Torah? And the explanation is that you can learn that same part of the Torah on a much deeper level. And when the neshama goes up, hopefully the neshama stays down here forever, Mashiach comes. And we don't have to go to the world to come. This is the world to come, right here. Then Mashiach will teach us the deepest teachings of the Torah. And we'll understand how Shor Shenagachat Hapara doesn't only or necessarily mean literally, but mainly on a much deeper, on a much deeper level. So you have the Torah the way it is, quote unquote, literally, and then you have the Torah on a much deeper level, and that's Ein Sof. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and there's no end to it, because it's Hashem's mind. It's not our mind. If it's our thing, we can say, you know what? Wow, we understand it, we enjoy it, that's wonderful. But once we realize that it's Hashem's Torah, we realize that our small, finite mind, Hashem gives us the ability to connect to His infinite Torah, that's priceless. And we can only aspire more and more to be able to fit our little minds, to make ourselves a little bit less ego, and to put Hashem in the forefront, and to say, wow, what a great zechut we have to be able to learn Hashem's infinite Torah. So what do we see over here? We see that you can view a part of the Torah, whether it's Megillas Esther or Tractate Bava Kama, or whatever it is, and have the zechut, the honor, and the ability to be able to see much deeper than what it really is. But it's all there. You don't have to look at something else in order to reveal it. Someone that has a laser vision, like a tzaddik, is able to learn a piece of Torah and right away understand the depth. Here's another great example. And with this, we'll finish the class. The Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, used to learn with the Malach. The Malach, his name was Rabbi Avram, the Malach, the angel. He was the son of the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid, Rabbi Dov Ber, was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Maggid of Mezrich had a son who was a very holy person. He was, to the extent that they called him the Malach. Now, the Alter Rebbe was a genius in the Nigla the Torah, in the revealed part of the Torah. And he came to learn Chassidus from the Maggid. The Malach knew Chassidus very well, but perhaps he was not that tremendously versed in the teachings of Kabbalah, of Nigla, of the revealed part of the Torah. And so they opened up the first page of Mishnah, which is the Tractate Brachot, Mesechet Brachot, and it reads as follows: Me'ematai korun et shema ba'arvit. The literal translation is, when, or from what time do we read the Shema in the evenings? And then there are three opinions. Each one's, there's one opinion of from when, and then there are three opinions until when you can say the Shema. So as soon as the Alter Rebbe started to read the Mishnah, even before he got to the Talmud, let alone getting to the teachings of Kabbalah, right away the Malach, Rabbi Avram the Malach, his Chavruta, said to him, wow, this is amazing. Me'ematai, instead of translating literally from when, he said me'ematai, me'ema, from fear. This is awesome. We need to read Shema in the evenings, me'ematai, from fear, me'ema. This blew the Alter Rebbe away. He was fascinated by this. How you could just open up just the first few words of the Mishnah and already be able to see the deeper Kabbalistic interpretation of this Mishnah. Even without even finding out the answer of from what time can you say the Shema, or from when? From when when it becomes dark, when the 3 stars come out. Even before we got to the answer, right away the Malach, the angel, Rabbi Avram the Malach, the son of the Maggid, he right away had a laser vision, and he saw right through the Mishnah. So that's something which is awesome. It's a great zechut. And the more we learn Chassidus, the more we train our minds how to see the depth within every situation. And it could be difficult because we're human beings. It's understandable. It's perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, we have to at least realize that the Torah that we learn, there are so many more levels. There are so many more interpretations. There's so many more perspectives to every word, to every letter, to every concept that we learn. And the knowledge itself will hopefully guide us to be able to try to see the light within every page of Torah that we learn, every word of Torah, every chapter, and every paragraph. Thank you so much for joining us. Bezrat Hashem, we look forward to seeing you for the Kabbalah Cafe tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you very much. All the best. Shalom, shalom.